Good day everyone, I'm Donalyn Isogon, second year college BEd student in Palawan State University, Nara campus. And today, we were going to tackle in Module 7, Chapter 7, the Learning and Other Marginalization Groups, Subject and Ed 7, Foundation of Special and Exclusive Education, submitted to Ma'am Miriam Salido. Today, we will explore what marginalization means, why it happens, who is affected, and how inclusive education can help create a better learning environment for all. In this section, you will understand what marginalization means, especially in the area of education. You will learn about the different groups that are marginalized in society and in education. You will explore a process that could be used to identify issues of marginalization in class or school. There might be situations that you are not aware of that have marginalization issues, and it's important for you and the adults in the school community to be aware of the situation that an appropriate response can be given. What is the marginalization? Marginalization is the process where individuals or groups are forced to the edge of society and treated less important. In education, this happens when learners are excluded from participating purely due to cultural, social, economic, or physical differences. So, marginalization is the process by which individuals or groups are pushed to the edge of society, often treated as less important, less capable, or less deserving of rights and resources. It results in limited participation, restricted access to opportunities, and social exclusion. For example, a 12-year-old boy from a remote indigenous community speaks a native language not used in school because he cannot understand the language of instruction and the teacher is not trained to support his learning needs. He feels isolated and discouraged. Eventually, he stopped going to school. In this example, the child is marginalized due to cultural and linguistic differences, resulting in exclusion from meaningful education. Theory of marginalization. The peculiar personality traits that arise when a person is situated in marginal position among two social environments that are not completely matched. The theory of marginalization can trace its roots to the theory of the marginal man, in which the analysis of Park and Stonequist of the marginal man focuses on an individual who is born and raised in one culture and is immersed in a different prevailing culture. The theory of marginalization explains the psychological and social struggle of the individuals who are caught between two different culture or social environments that are not purely compatible. This situation can lead to confusion, identity crisis, and feeling of rejection. When marginalization happens, marginalization naturally starts even before children get into school and persists until they become adults. Marginalization refers to the process by which certain individuals or groups are pushed to the edge of society, limiting their access to resources, opportunities, and participation. In, in an earlier research, Messiah explored how marginalization can be conceptualized in four general ways. Number one, the child experiences some kind of marginalization that is recognized by almost everybody, including himself or herself. This is when marginalization is clearly visible to both the child and the people around them. The exclusion or disadvantage is obvious and widely acknowledged. Number two, the child feels that he or she is experiencing marginalization, whereas most of the others do not recognize this. In this case, the child perceives exclusion, but others around them do not acknowledge or see anything wrong. This type of marginalization is often subtle or hidden. Number three, when a child is found in what appears to be marginalized situation but does not feel it or does not view it as marginalization, the child is objectively in a disadvantaged or excluded situation, but it but is either unaware of it has normalized that experience due to their environment. Number 4. When a child is experiencing marginalization but does not admit it, the child may know they are being marginalized but choose not to acknowledge or speak about it, possible due to fear, embarrassment, or wanting to avoid conflict. Next is marginalization and inclusion. Marginalization is the act of placing a person or group in a position of lesser importance, influence, or power. It often means excluding someone from full participation in society, school, or community life, whether intentionally or unintentionally. For example, a child with a speech impairment is never chosen to present group work, even though the child has good ideas, classmates and even the teacher overlook them due to their difficulty speaking. The child is marginalized because their voice and contribution are not valued equally. In inclusion, is the process or policy of providing equal access to opportunities and resources for people who might otherwise be excluded or marginalized. Inclusion is the intentionally process or policy of ensuring that everyone, especially those at risk of being excluded, has equal access to opportunities, resources, and participation. It focuses on valuing diversity and removing barriers. For example, the teacher assigned group rules to ensure that all students, including one with a hearing impairment, are given leadership and participation opportunities. In education, inclusion has become the term used to describe the right of parents and children to access mainstream education alongside their peers with parents want it and children needs can be met. Integration, where the focus was on the child's ability to adapt, has been replaced by inclusion. The focus for inclusion is on the setting's ability to adapt to the needs of the child, altering where necessary the way it works. Mises 2012 manifests young people's voice can intensify systems, process and experiences in congruences with include of education. Voice is clearly identified as one of the student rights. It means having a say as well as referring to language and emotional components as well as nonverbal means that are used to experience opinions. It said that inclusion means that all children, regardless of their abilities, backgrounds, or needs, have the right to attend mainstream school with their peers. The school is expected to adjust its environment, teaching methods, and support system so that every child can participate and succeed. And according to Miss Missia, student voice is a critical part of inclusion. It means giving learners the opportunity to express their feelings, needs, and ideas, recognizing verbal, emotional, and nonverbal forms of communication, and ensuring that students are listened to and involved in decisions that affect their learnings. There are four cyclical process. The fourth cyclical process is promoting inclusive education by listening to learners, especially those from marginalized groups, and transforming school practices to become more responsive and equitable. So the first step in four cyclical process is the opening doors, enabling voices to be heard. This step is about creating a safe and open environment where all learners, especially those marginalized, feels that their opinions, emotions, and experiences matter. It includes both verbal and nonverbal ways of communication. A teacher, for example, The teacher regularly holds circle time where students are encouraged to share how they feel about school. A child from a reputed family who was initially quiet begins using drawing and pictures to express loneliness and confusion about classroom's activities. Then step number 2, looking Looking closely, bringing concern to the surface. These steps involve actively observing, listening, and identifying barriers faced by marginalized learners. It is about noticing the what might otherwise be ignored and understanding each child's unique challenges. For example, a teacher observed that an indigenous child rarely participates in groups activities. After a one-on-one talk, the child explained feelings left out because classmates make fun of their accents. This brings the hidden concern to light. Step number 3, making sense of the evidence, sharing data with learners. The school community Te- teacher and student discuss findings or observation together to understand the nature of marginalization. This helps builds awareness, empathy, and collaboration solution. Step number 4, dealing with marginalization, encouraging inclusive thinking and practice. This final step is about implementing inclusive strategies and changing attitude or practices in response to what was learned. It fosters a culture of acceptance, empathy, and fairness. For example, after understanding that abused children may fear speaking in class, the school set up a safe space and gives those learners the opinion to participate through journaling, anonymous suggestion boxes, or small group tasks. The whole class is also engaged in lessons about respect, empathy, and child rights. This cyclical approach ensures that marginalized learners are not just seen but heard, understood, and included, and that inclusion becomes a continuous reflective process in the classroom and school community. There's different learners in marginalized groups. The first is the child laborers or the domestic helpers. So, the child laborers or domestic helpers, the International Labor Organization ILO describes child labor as work that deprives children of their childhood, their potential, and their dignity, and that is harmful to physical and mental development. Child labor caused by poverty, lack of education, and lack of school. These children are often unable to attend school because they are forced to work at a young age. The lack of education keeps them trapped in the cycle of poverty and exploitation. For example, 10-year-old girl working as domestic helper in Manila is not allowed to go to school because her employer needs her full time. She grew up without formal education and remains unqualified for better paying jobs. Next is the indigenous people. Indigenous communities, peoples, and nations are those which, having a historical continuity with pre-invasion and pre-colonial societies that develop on their territories, consider themselves distinct from other sectors of the society now prevailing on those territories or part of them. They form a present non-dominant sectors of society and are determined to preserve, develop, and transmit to future generations their ancestral territories and their ethnic as mil- as the basis of their continuous existence as people in accordance with the cultural patterns, social instruction, and legal system. So, in the indigenous people, many indigenous communities live in remote areas where schools are either too far, underfunded, or do not offer culturally relevant education. This results in high dropout rates and educational neglect. The next is the abused children. The World Health Organization defines maltreatment as the abuse and neglect that occurs to children under 18 years of age. It includes all types of physical and or emotional ill treatments, sexual abuse, neglect, negligence, and commercial or the other exploitation, which result in actual or potential harm of the child health, survival, development, or dignity in the context of relationship of responsibility, trust, or power. So the child who suffer abuse at home or in institution may face psychological trauma that hinders their learning. They may miss school often or be withdrawn, making it hard for them to succeed academically. Next is the refuge or displaced children. The UNHCR, or the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, defines refuge as someone who has been forced to flee his or her country because of persecution, war, and violence. An internally displaced person, or IDP, is someone who has been forced to flee their home but never crossed an international border. The Declaration of Human Rights and the Convention of Child Rights emphasize that education is the right of every person, every child. This means that education policies are in place. The 2030 United Nations Agenda for Sustainable Development considers education as essential to have advancement of humankind. So the refugee or displaced children, refugee or internally displaced children often lost access to their education due to war, conflict, or migration. Education may not be a priority in refugee camps, or it may be impossible to continue schooling in the host country due to language or legal barriers. The last is the children in conflict zones. Manuel Fontaine, UNICEF Director for Emergency Programs, said children living in conflict zones around the world have continued to suffer through extreme levels in violence over the past 12 months, and the world has continued to fail them. It is said that children in countries that are at war being used as human shield, killed, maimed, and recruited to fight. So in the child in conflict zone, war zones often result in destroyed schools, streets to safety, and use children to in armed conflict, making education not just inaccessible but dangerous. Insufficient access to education in a critical form of marginalization because it compounds all other disadvantage, whether it's due to poverty, culture, abuse, displacement, or war. When a child is denied the right to learn, they are denied a future. Inclusion education policies are practices are essential to ensuring that all learners, regardless of background, can participate meaningful in society. The UN has six categories identified of human rights violation against children, known as the six graves violation. This violation includes the following. First is killing, maiming of children, abduction of children, recruitment of or use of children as soldiers, sexual violence against children, and last attacks against school or hospitals and denial of humanitarian access. The United Nations Development Program of 1996, as cited in MESUA 2012, this defines marginalization as the state of being considered unimportant, undesirable, unworthy, insignificant, and different, resulting in inequity, unfairness, deprivation, and enforced lack of access to mainstream power. In its 2010 Global Monitoring Report, UNESCO stated that education can neutralize inequality and persisting literacy, and also support prejudice and continue marginalization. The highest form of marginalization is an insufficient in the availability of education. So that's all. Thank you.